People that are building around BTC are literally building the prison financial walls around themselves.
This was not an accident. This was done to Bitcoin.
This guy openly got caught being paid by people working for U.S. intelligence agencies to make Bitcoin less useful for payments, literally to help disrupt Bitcoin. And
they're selling you the crutches for your broken legs.
It made it so these businesses can't accept payments in Bitcoin. Safety is certainly entitled to his opinion as to what Bitcoin should be, but he's not entitled to rewrite history.
Over the past 2 months, we've had several guests related to cryptocurrencies. First, we spoke with somebody that was incredibly positive and bullish about BTC and BSV, almost to the point where it was like a religious devotion. It was quite an interesting conversation. Definitely recommend you guys going back and checking it out if you didn't see that one. Then a few weeks later, we spoke with somebody that was incredibly pessimistic on all cryptocurrencies, and he had a list of 9 reasons why they were everything from scams to worthless to failures, and that was another interesting episode. And I didn't agree with either of those guests a lot, and those were good chats. You should check them out. There's one guy that I have followed since I first got into crypto, and when I first got in, it was around $400. That was the value. I forgot. I don't know what time that was in history. We could go look it up, but that was about when I found out about it and immediately got involved in the ways that I did. This guy, today's guest, has been involved way earlier, way before me. He has been an investor in 30 some odd companies, most of which are in the crypto space. He, I think, might be the most frequent guest on the Anarchast podcast. He was in episode 130, 241, 265, 349, and 452. This is my first time talking to him. Today we're going to talk to Roger Ver.
From Dallas, Texas, this is Anarchast.
Roger Ver, I feel like you should be welcoming me to the podcast because you've almost been on it more than I have. How are you, sir? It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, I didn't realize that maybe I'm the most frequent guest on Anarchast ever, but as I saw, the famous anarchist scroll through in the opening line there, just obviously I'm right at home. Lysander Spooner had a giant influence on me. Walter Block, Ron Paul, of course. I feel right at home here, so I'm glad to be back home.
Well, welcome back. I'm really looking forward to our chat. I read your book. It was an amazing flyover over the history of cryptocurrency in the country, who's been in control, the intrigue, the takeovers, the subterfuge, the bad actors. It was really, really, really well done. And let me just show the cover. The name of your book is Hijacking Bitcoin, The Hidden History of BTC. This is out and available now. Audiobook coming soon, if not already available. Links will be in the description. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So very, very well done on writing your book. It's an aspiration of mine to be able to write a book. So I'm proud of people that are able to do it, especially as well as you have. Today,
thank you so much for that. Although I have to say, credit where credit is due. Steve Patterson is my co-author with that and did an absolutely amazing job as well. And actually, he did most of the heavy lifting on that, but he was right there by my side through this entire history of the hijacking of Bitcoin. He lived it firsthand as well.
Very, very good. Thanks for mentioning that. I'm sorry I missed that attribution. I have a lot of quotes from the book that I think are excellent talking points for our conversation. So there's going to be some back and forth, reading little paragraphs from your book and maybe discussing some of the more interesting points. And I want to kick that off with this one right here. This is a quote from the Bitcoin Standard where this person wrote, "Bitcoin can be seen as the new emerging reserve currency for online transactions, where the online equivalent of banks will issue Bitcoin-backed tokens to users while keeping their hoard of Bitcoins in cold storage. On-chain payments aren't for the merchant. They're for central banks. You can have all the world's payment networks built on top of Bitcoin, only settling on-chain. BTC is like central bank gold under a gold standard." This was a central point of contention in my first interview a while back with the guy that was very bullish on BTC and BSV. And it was this question of what is the purpose of Bitcoin? And who says what the purpose of Bitcoin is? Is it cash or is it a store of value? And there's very few people in the world as qualified to answer that question as you. So I'm curious what your answer is.
Yeah, I'm certainly entitled to his opinion as to what Bitcoin should be, but he's not entitled to rewrite history as to what it originally was intended to be. Anybody can go out there and read the original, postings by Satoshi Nakamoto. They can ask the people that got involved in the project early on. Like, it was 100% clear Bitcoin was meant to be peer-to-peer electronic cash for the world, where everybody could hold their own private keys and could do self-custody, and they didn't need a bank, and they didn't need an intermediary, and they didn't need any of this, traditional nonsense that Safety's literally advocating that they just integrate Bitcoin directly into in his book. And so, like, it's fine if you think that that's a better system than what Bitcoin initially was intended to be, but it's not fine to rewrite history and to lie to the world that that's what Bitcoin was intended to be from day one. And that's what this book is trying to do, is trying to set the record straight and say, hey, here's the real history, here's the real truth. And it's, as you saw yourself, citations all throughout the book, everything's backed up by, truth and evidence and facts. And so, Safety and others, they're entitled to their opinions as to what could be a better version of Bitcoin, but they're not entitled to rewrite history as they've really attempted to do. And so again, this book is trying to set the record straight as to what the actual history of Bitcoin it was and what its intent was from day one, which was peer-to-peer cash for the world, not digital gold in which you need a custodian like, Bank of America or Wells Fargo or BlackRock to hold your coins for you.
There's so as an entrepreneur, somebody that started businesses, created products and sold them, I have a sense of how you go from imagining a product to creating it, to bringing it to market, to satisfying customer demand, to making profit on that. I see this flaw, and you're another perfect person to ask this question to, in open source, decentralized projects like Bitcoin, where there is no head at the board table. There is no one in charge that can make decisions. It's supposed to be everyone contributes, or a consensus, which we can talk more about later. There's a concept called POSIWID. You may have heard of it. The purpose of a system is what it does. That's like an essentialist thing that I might not agree with, but the actual quote is better. There's no point in claiming that the purpose of a system is to do what it constantly fails to do. And so that's like a realist view of the current state of Bitcoin. And my question then becomes, well, if everyone's in charge, no one is. But that's not really the case. There are people in control of making these decisions. And I kind of wanted to get your take on that. Like, who is in control? How does that power function? Who makes the decisions about what Bitcoin is? Because it's not everybody, and it's not no one.
Yeah, it's certainly not everybody, and it's certainly not no one. It's some small number of people, and different people have more influence than others. And at one point, I had a pretty large influence as well, and I did my best to sound the alarm bells and cause concern for people. Like, hey, BTC is being morphed into a settlement layer for a product that probably won't even work, right? Which was Lightning Network. And here we are, about a decade later, not much attraction with that at all. It doesn't work. And I'm really concerned at this point that people that are building around BTC are literally building the prison financial walls around themselves here. If you have to use a custodian for everything with something like BTC, that's even worse than the dollars and euros that people were using in the past. Like, at least people were still able to, shuffle around cash and do things like that outside of the system and engage in aggregate stacks that way. Whereas now with BTC, if you have to use a custodian for everything and they're trying to outlaw, self-custodial, like wallet payments, like, this is, what's the joke around on the internet? George Orwell's 1984 was supposed to be a cautionary tale, not an instruction manual. But it feels like they're really starting to use it as an instruction manual for how to monitor every last little aspect of our lives at this point. And it's really disappointing to see something. And you make some interesting points about the purpose of a system is what it does. That seems to be where we're at with BTC today. Like, it's really becoming a tool of financial surveillance and financial control more so than a tool of financial liberation.
Yes. Yeah. And
hopefully there's other cryptocurrencies out there still, right? We have the Moneros and Zcashes and Zanos out there in the world that are still building the tools to empower individuals to have more control of their own lives. So I'm still very excited and optimistic about cryptocurrencies as a whole, but I'm far, far, far less optimistic about BTC today because the average person can't really afford to use it, or it's too complicated to use in a way in which you're having custody of over your own funds. And basically, it's just become this giant monitoring, tracking, dystopian nightmare of surveillance.
Yeah, just use PayPal. Like if you're going to have a centralized
They've already
storage
BTC into PayPal, so you really might as well use PayPal.
I've been saying it the whole time. There's two advantages to crypto that I really care about: privacy, which BTC doesn't really have unless you take a lot of extra steps, and sovereignty, like the ability to move your money around as you see fit and not have it stolen or seized. And if you're going to centralize it, I mean, you don't really have privacy. And if you give up the sovereignty through centralization, what are you doing? Just use Venmo. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me what they're trying to accomplish. So, in your book, here's another good one: the differences between Bitcoin Core and what it is today and what it was originally designed to be. And this is a great summary, so I wanted to share it with people. The differences between the original design and Bitcoin Core's new design can be captured with 5 critical ideas. Number 1, Bitcoin was designed to be digital cash used to make payments over the internet. It was designed to have extremely low transaction fees, designed to scale with block size increases, not designed for the average user to run his own node, and its economic design is as important as its software design. And then we go to commentators from network television to popular podcasts. You might believe these 5 things. It was designed to be a store of value, even if it doesn't work as a medium of exchange. Supposed to have high transaction fees. Doesn't scale with block size increases. Its security depends on regular users running their own entire nodes. And its design was broken and needed to be fixed by software engineers. What a fantastic summary of the entire Bitcoin war, civil war era that was. And your book also goes into exactly how that progressed. Like the code was owned by Satoshi. He passed it on to another guy, I can't remember his name. Thank you. Who then passed it on to 5 people that he selected. And the person that was supposed to be in charge of those kind of sat on their hands and didn't really lead the team. And so that's where we are today, right?
Yeah, no surprise that I agree with the words that were written in my own book there. It's the exact summary of what happened right there. And here we are today where the masses are completely confused about Bitcoin, what it was intended to be, and how it worked originally. Like it became popular to begin with because it had those characteristics. People could self-custody. People back then thought it was private or anonymous, and it was super fast, easy, cheap, and reliable to use. And today it's kind of none of those things. So by intentional design of those software engineers.
Right. And it's and I want to get into this later. They created sort of a conflict of interest. They undermined the currency and then introduced the solution to the problems they created, which was a mind-blowing point that I definitely want to get to. The next part in your book that really hit me was the 2 failure modes that you saw as a future for Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general. Can you talk about those 2? The custodialism.
Maybe you can refresh my memory. You're talking about lots of transactions with low fees, or
custodial wallets and abandonment were your 2 sort of failure modes.
Yeah, we're seeing in terms of payments it happening already. Like far fewer people are using BTC for payments than they were previously. Like the numbers are going down, and then everyone's using a custodial wallet. Like you're losing self-sovereignty, and you're losing the characteristics that made it popular to begin with, as we're seeing right now today. Like I just I think 48 hours ago, I'm one of the seed investors. I think the seed investor for BitPay, one of the biggest payment processors in the world for crypto. The percentage of people using BTC for payments is going down, 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 right? And more other altcoins are taking place of it because it works better. But due to regulatory pressure, I'm sure, and I didn't ask Stephen Pear, the CEO of BitPay, directly, but I'm sure they're scared to integrate coins like Narrow and other privacy coins just because of the regulatory pushback. And it's really disappointing to see that that's where we're at. But there's some other tools where people can use those sort of things without needing a centralized payment processor. But man, I don't think that the powers that be in the world are going to just let their control of the world's money supply, get out of their hands and out of their clutches. It was a really intentional thing that what was done to Bitcoin. I remember it happening as early as 2011 when Bitcoin over the course of a couple of weeks went from like $2 to $30 over maybe 2 weeks. And it was the first time in Bitcoin's history in which it started to get some worldwide media attention. And literally the main discussion platform for Bitcoin at that point was a place called bitcointalk.org. It got flooded with spam bots, and they intentionally made discussion of Bitcoin impossible during the time when Bitcoin got its first worldwide media attention. And so as early as 2011, they've been throwing, sand in the gears of Bitcoin there to disrupt people from being able to discuss it and pay attention to it. And today, they've just successfully disrupted people being able to use it for payments in a self-sovereign manner.
I got so freaking excited about Bitcoin when this one thing happened. When Steam, the largest video game platform on the internet, if you play video games, you have Steam, and you probably have most of your video games on that platform. They started accepting Bitcoin. I'm like, holy shit, everybody, this is actually going to work. This is massive. This is huge. And other websites. Did Amazon start taking Bitcoin at one point?
Amazon did not, but pretty much all their competitors did. And the one that was a real aha moment for me was Expedia.com started accepting Bitcoin. So I could book all my travel easily with Bitcoin, and it was wonderful. And then sure enough, just as I had been sounding the alarm bell, the blocks on Bitcoin became full by the intentional design of these software engineers who hijacked the product. And when the blocks became full, the transactions became super expensive and super unreliable. And guess what? Expedia stopped accepting Bitcoin. Microsoft stopped accepting Bitcoin. Steam stopped accepting Bitcoin. And many of them to this very day no longer accept any cryptocurrency at all because they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And so they gave it a try once and they're done with it. And to this very day, Expedia still does not accept Bitcoin. And it's really disappointing. And, the world needs software engineers, but software engineers aren't, they don't know everything. They're not, if they're not the world's best business people, and they absolutely, without any doubt, screwed up this wonderful, useful product in the form of Bitcoin and morphed it into something that, you can't deny, the price performance of Bitcoin has been better than many other cryptocurrencies over the last few years. But I think it's just people purely speculating on the name. They have no understanding of what the actual characteristics of it are that made it useful to begin with. And then, let's see, one of our favorite economists of people watching this show, I'm sure, the seen and the unseen is from the Frederick Bastiat. I'm sorry, talking about the seen and the unseen, right? So what we see is the price of Bitcoin today is $60-something thousand. What's not seen is where it could have been today if they hadn't hijacked the product. Maybe it would have been $600-something thousand today if Microsoft and Expedia and Steam and all these companies had continued to accept it, and it just grew and grew and grew, and people continued to have a good user experience of it the entire way through, right? So you can't just look at what we see. You have to take into consideration what's not seen. And I think what's not seen is that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin specifically would have been far, far, far farther ahead than we are today had it not ran into this disastrous intentional design problems caused by these software engineers a few years back.
They really blew it, man. And I'm so glad that you included the letter from Steam. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's long, but I'm ready, man. I'm excited about this conversation. They said, as of today,
they pointed out the points that I just made. So go for it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Steam will no longer support Bitcoin as a payment method due to high fees and volatility in the value. And then they close by saying, look, it's just untenable to support Bitcoin as a payment option. This was, like you said, this was not an accident. This wasn't inherent in the technology. This was done to Bitcoin by the people that were in charge. This was done to Bitcoin. And like you said,
and there's another story.
Go ahead.
There's another story in the book that I should point out here on Anarchast, because the very first place I ever met this person was at the very, very first Anarchapulco. And so there's a man named Peter Todd that's covered in the book who is openly paid, or it came, today it's open, at the time it was secret, but he was secretly paid at the time by a man claiming to work for a U.S. intelligence agency to implement things that made Bitcoin less useful for payments. One of which was this replaced by fee feature, which is just a fancy name for saying allow people to do chargebacks on Bitcoin, not just like minutes later, but hours, days, and sometimes weeks later, they can do chargebacks on Bitcoin thanks to this guy, Peter Todd, and what he implemented. And it was really interesting. He came to the very first Anarchapulco there that was hosted in Acapulco, Mexico. I met him there. I spoke with him there. He didn't seem very interested in anarchism. He didn't seem very interested in free markets. He didn't seem like very interested in any of this sort of thing. And so the thought later came to my mind, why would this person have been going to Anarchapulco, which was one of the hotbeds of Bitcoin adoption, back then at the very first one? This would have been, I don't know, 2012 or 2013 or something like that. It's been a while now. And then to the best of my knowledge, he never attended another Anarchapulco ever since. And so like this guy openly got caught being paid by people working for US intelligence agencies to make Bitcoin less useful for payments. And he's showing up at like what was basically one of the earliest Bitcoin conferences. Put two and two together there. What's this guy's agenda? So to me, it seems like his agenda was literally to help disrupt Bitcoin, and he did a pretty darn good job of it.
Had you ever talked about that prior to this book? Because I know there were some things that you said that were in this book that you had never really exposed previously.
I may have even mentioned that on a previous episode of Anarchast. I think I've mentioned it here or there a little bit, but maybe not quite so openly. But it just seems really, really suspicious to me. And at this point, like, he literally got caught red-handed taking money from somebody who claimed to be working for U.S. intelligence agency to implement replace by fee, which incredibly damaged Bitcoin, and to put out this just absolute nonsense propaganda video that's still on YouTube, claiming the exact opposite of what was true as to why we need to keep the blocks small on Bitcoin to keep it decentralized. Where is the truth of the matter is that by keeping the blocks small on Bitcoin, it made it completely centralized where everybody has to use PayPal as a custodian.
Let's talk about replace by fee real quick. So for people that don't know what replace by fee is, maybe you can give them a quick intro and then tell them exactly what that actually did to the cryptocurrency and what it prevented from being possible.
Gladly. So in the early days of Bitcoin, the rule on the Bitcoin network was this thing called first seen, first safe, which is basically just a fancy way of saying that once I send you a Bitcoin trip payment, that's the only payment the network's going to accept, and I don't have a way to reroute that payment back to myself or to somebody else or to change it. Once I've sent it, that's it. And the miners are going to include that in the next block, and that's the end of the story, and there's no room for debate or argument or anything like that. Peter Todd successfully, by a bunch of, by hook and crook, managed to get the rule of the network changed later to something called replace by fee, which means if I send you a Bitcoin transaction, I then have, until the time that transaction is included in a block, the ability to reverse that transaction, either sending it back to me or sending it out to my buddy or to somebody else, or basically to allow chargebacks or payment alterations on the Bitcoin network. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, when the blocks became full by the intentional design of these same sort of people, instead of me just having until the next block to do a chargeback of that thing, when the blocks became full, the average confirmation time became longer than 2 weeks at some point, which meant I had more than 2 weeks to do a chargeback of my Bitcoin transaction. How on earth is Steam going to accept a payment method that has 2 weeks for a chargeback, or Expedia that has 2 weeks for a chargeback? They're not going to sell you an airline ticket. You'll be off the flight and done and over in 2 weeks, right? Like, it made it so these businesses can't accept payments in Bitcoin for the things that they were trying to sell online. And that was the thing that attracted myself and so many other people to Bitcoin early on, is the usefulness for payments on the internet. And so these people literally intentionally broke Bitcoin's biggest selling point, is that you could use it for payments on the internet, and somehow convinced the world that this was a good idea using, censorship and propaganda effectively, which is covered in the book as well.
They literally eliminated the ability for the currency to handle instant payments. My God,
they did,
I'm looking at the average confirmation time. A week ago, it was 600 seconds, which is several hours. Today, it's 2 hours.
No, 600 seconds is 10 minutes.
Oh, so 600 minutes. 600 minutes.
Which would be 10 hours, yeah.
Right,
So,
and then today, it's 120 minutes, not seconds, sorry. Yeah.
Which is 2 hours, right? And so it went from being instant, right, like maybe, half a second, 1 full second, to now, a couple hours. Like,
a coffee vendor wouldn't even risk a 2 hour confirmation time to see if a customer, they would be gone and you would never see them again with their coffee by the time you found out if you got to keep the money they gave you. It is absolutely insane. And this was
a great demonstration made by Hayden Otto. He did exactly that. He got just regular old off the shelf wallet software. I think he was actually using a green address, which is literally the wallet put out by these Blockstream guys, which was one of the organizations most influential in the hijacking of Bitcoin. He went into a coffee shop, bought coffee, paid for it with Bitcoin, and then walked right out and did a chargeback right there, not using any special software, just the regular old app available, like in the the Apple App Store or Android Play Store there. So they literally broke Bitcoin for payments, and they did it on purpose. And then as if it's not crazy enough, the CEO of Blockstream is out there, banging the drum, telling everybody, hey, just use our proprietary liquid sidechain where his company gets fees for every transaction you make on it. So it's just like, another libertarian who had a big influence on me was Harry Brown. And he used to say, the government's like somebody who breaks your legs and then hands you a pair of crutches and say, see, if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be able to walk. Adam Back and his group did the exact same thing to Bitcoin. They broke Bitcoin for payments, and then they're handing you tools that they earn money from, like Lightning, Liquid Network. And they're saying, see, if it wasn't for us having built Liquid Network for you, you wouldn't be able to use Bitcoin at all. And it's just like really frustrating that people have fallen for this sort of thing. But again, this book is out there, set the record straight.
And they get the liquid fees. So they're selling you the crutches for your broken legs, which is amazing.
Yep. And more people should be aware of this, and that's the goal of this book.
Yes. Okay. So another thing, I kind of tuned out of BTC following the Civil War, because I was like, oh, honestly, call me stupid, I might be, but I was like, okay, this tech is now legacy tech. It's not gonna really be the freedom tech that I was looking for or hoping for. You're right. The value is skyrocketing, and maybe we can talk about that next and what that means for our criticisms of it. But I really just stopped paying attention. My bag was lost in a boating accident, but it would have been in BCH and Monero. And I'm happy because those currencies do what I want them to when I want them to do them, and are not stupidly expensive to use. And so I kind of checked out, honestly, for several years. And your book was the first time I've really gotten looped back in on everything that happened. I had been, somebody tried to get me involved in the Lightning Network, and they did that thing that, we as cryptocurrency advocates would do. We'd get somebody involved, we'd get them to install the app on their phone, and we'd send them a few bucks in Bitcoin or whatever, just to kind of get them looped into the idea of having this technology. And so, somebody did that to me with the Lightning Network, and I installed the app, and they sent me like $20 on the Lightning Network. And I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. And then 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, I opened the app just to check my balance, because I wanted to, play with it and learn about the technology and move my money out of Lightning and into Bitcoin or into the Bitcoin mainnet or whatever. And the channel had been closed, and I didn't have the money anymore. And I had no idea why or how that happened, because that's not how cryptocurrency is supposed to work. But I had received $20. The balance had shown in my wallet, and then I went away for a month and came back, and it was gone. And I honestly, at that point, I really checked out. I'm like, okay, they are bolting. I'm an engineer, a software engineer. I know bolt-on garbage technology when I see it. And so I really just kind of wrote it off and moved on with my life. But when I read your book, I realized what probably actually happened, because you talk about some of the problems with the Lightning Network. I have a list of them from your book, but I think one of the ones that might have got me in this situation is that when the channel's closed, if you don't have a node online to sort of protect your interests in the channel, because you have to have a Lightning node running to receive money.
Online all the time, 24/7.
Which is insane. What might have happened is that they have the ability, when they close the channel out, maybe you can explain this, to somehow set the closing balances to a prior transaction than one that you might have seen happen, right?
Yeah, they can close out the channel with a prior channel state. So let's say I send you $20 on Lightning, and then you go offline. I'll say, oh, great, I'm going to close the channel at a state before I sent you the $20, which means I still have the $20. Then if you're not online to notice and complain about it, boom, I get the $20 back that you thought you had. And so the other, probably the biggest, I don't know, maybe scam is a little bit too strong of a word, but it's pretty close to a scam at this point, is they're calling all these Lightning things wallets. They're not wallets, they're custodial accounts. Don't call an account a wallet. Call a real wallet a wallet. Call an account, right? Your PayPal account is an account. Your Bank of America account is an account. Wallet of Satoshi isn't a wallet, it's an account. And most of these other Lightning Network apps out there aren't wallets, they're accounts. And so I think they're doing the whole world a big giant disservice by calling things that are custodial accounts wallets. And I'm really sick of that, and I'm going to keep calling them out on that as well.
You also point out that the way Lightning Network works is based on, opening channels with people, which require, a minimum of 2 on-chain BTC chain transactions, which can cost, $50 at any given time. Hope you don't need your money at a bad time. So you do 1 on-chain transaction to open the channel, then you sort of have money locked in the channel, and that really only allows you to send that money between one other person that you have on the channel, unless you open the channel with a centralized sort of hub that maintains channels with tons of people, centralizing basically current transactions. What's the word I'm looking for? Centralizes commerce.
Yeah, the whole network, right? And a lot of those hubs require your KYC documentation as well. So they can control everything. They can block your payments, and like the whole thing's just, probably the most successful vaporware ever, where they promised the world for years and years and years and fooled people into believing in it and fooled people into crippling Bitcoin because they believed in the hope of the Lightning Network. And just now people are finally starting to realize that it was just a bunch of, garbage. I think you used the term, the garbage bolt-on-ware or something like that.
It's bolt-on technology. Yeah, instead of fixing it or changing something fundamentally to make it work better, it's when you bolt on a Band-Aid to try and gloss over the problem. That's what Lightning has felt like since the first time I heard about it. It's like, why aren't you just fixing the tech? Why are you bolting on this other thing? That doesn't make logical sense to me.
Well, I'd love to point out that the tech was fixed, and today it's called Bitcoin Cash. And a lot of people don't realize too, like the civil war that went on within Bitcoin, it was so incredibly close. Whereas the thing that's called Bitcoin Cash today almost kept the Bitcoin name and kept the BTC ticker symbol. And if you stop and think for a minute, let's say the technology that's called Bitcoin Cash today had kept the Bitcoin name, and the 1 megabyte SegWit Lightning Network version of Bitcoin was called something else, and people looked at this other thing that's, let's say they called it, Bitcoin 1 megabyte, and they said, wait a minute, the software engineers are openly saying they want the transactions to be slow, expensive, and unreliable, and that you shouldn't actually use it yourself and you should use a custodian. People would laugh them out of the room. They would be laughed out of the room. But the only reason they're not laughed out of the room today is because they managed to hijack the Bitcoin name. They stole and kept using dirty tricks and all sorts of things and immoral tactics and censorship and everything else. They kept the Bitcoin name and they kept the BTC ticker symbol. And I was just talking to a person a couple of days ago, because they were friends with me for a long time. They have hundreds of thousands of dollars in crypto, and she has no understanding of the crypto at all. She's keeping it all in an account. And if she was closer friends with me, she'd have a better understanding of this. But she just has it all in exchange, couldn't figure out how to send it, couldn't figure out how to do anything. And she's like, yeah, I want to buy more BTC. And I said, well, why do you want to buy more BTC? She goes, I saw the price went up, and I think it's going to go up more. And like, from an investment standpoint, yeah, I can't argue with her. It's done fine, and it's been a better investment than things like Monero or Bitcoin Cash. But from one of my favorite Twitter accounts, Sal the Agorist, says, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a get-free-quick scheme. And it's supposed to be a tool to empower individuals to have more control of their lives all over the world. And BTC has failed miserably at that. But other things like Bitcoin Cash and Monero and a bunch of others out there are succeeding at that still to this very day. And I think in the long term, the ones that help empower individuals will have an amazing price performance as well. But in the short term, it's disappointing. But BTC, even though it's not providing the financial freedom to people around the world like it was supposed to, you can't argue that it's performed better than these other ones so far. But give it some more time.
I keep telling myself, look, this is a version 1 tech that's been locked into what I consider a dead end path, a dead path. Like I keep thinking that at some point the world is going to wake up and realize that there's these other cryptos out there that have solved these problems, that are more performant, that are more private, and more feature rich. And I keep thinking that like when that happens, it's going to happen slowly and then all at once. And then I feel bad for people that have invested in Bitcoin, in BTC. What would you say though? Like if somebody came to you today, and I'm sure this happens to you more than you care for it to, but somebody comes up to you and they're like, I've got some money. How should I invest it in crypto? Roger Ver, like, what do you say? Do you recommend BTC because it's the best performer, or what do you say?
Yeah, I had this exact conversation last night at dinner with a longtime jiu-jitsu friend of mine. And the short answer is I tell him, I don't know, you need to decide for yourself. But what I think, and if I look at it, is like, there's a lot of momentum with BTC at this point. If you're just looking to make some money, probably have some BTC. There's a lot of momentum around Ethereum at this point, and all the other EVM chains. You should probably have some of those as well. And then if you want something to actually just transact in and make payments and not have to, worry about getting permission, I think BCH and Monero are fantastic for that as well. And then if you really want to have like a longer, punt or maybe, another good investment that also brings freedom to the world, if you stop and look back in the early days, it was Bitcoin. Everybody thought it was totally anonymous and people were using that for all sorts of things. And then later we saw a bunch of that commerce switch from Bitcoin to Monero because of the additional privacy there, and to a lesser extent, Bitcoin Cash. It's kind of interesting. The only cryptocurrencies ever to be used in these darknet markets were Bitcoin, and Monero now has basically taken over most of that sort of thing. But Bitcoin Cash actually had a darknet market at some point. It's the only other cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin and Monero to have ever had that, which I thought was an interesting little thing for Bitcoin Cash. But the other one, if you look at it, everybody was using Bitcoin for payments and then moved to Monero and other things because of the privacy. Mm-hmm. Then Ethereum came along. Everybody and their grandmother were making tokens on Ethereum, and they're doing tokens this and tokens that. The tokens have no privacy whatsoever. So I went out there and I thought, well, if people wanted to move from Bitcoin with no privacy to things like Monero with privacy, people are going to want to move from things like tokens with no privacy to tokens with privacy. What is the token privacy platform out there? And I looked and looked and looked, and there's basically nothing until I came across a project called Zano, Z-A-N-O, that's literally created by the original guy that coded up Monero for the first time, right? For what went on to become Monero. And so basically what Zano is imagine Monero, but instead of just having the one XMR token, there's the base Zano token, but anybody can build a privacy token on top of that. And the tokens themselves are just as private as a Monero transaction. So I can zip around, Roger token or Anarchist token or whatever else I want on top of the Zano blockchain. And all anybody trying to look at the blockchain can do is they can see a transaction happened, but they don't even know if the transaction was for Zano coin, for a Roger coin, for Anarchist coin. All they can see is that a transaction happened. They don't know from what address to what address. They don't know anything about it at all. And so we've seen the migration from Bitcoin to Monero. I think we'll see the migration of non-private tokens to privacy tokens. And so like the total market cap of Zano at this point is only 50 or 60 million bucks. I think that there's a real good chance that something like that will get traction in the future because, of course, people would rather use a token where you have privacy than a token where you don't. And so, people were talking about Bitcoin early on Anarchast. We were one of the first groups of people that really become interested in this technology. I think we're going to be one of the first groups of people to be interested in privacy token platforms. And I think Zano is in a real good position to be the leader in that front. And so I've been dabbling in that a little bit myself recently as well.
5 days ago, I was approached with an interview request. They wanted to talk about their project that was based on a chain that they were sort of describing as, it was Dero, D-E-R-O. They were describing it as like Monero, but with smart contracts like Ethereum. How does Zano compare to Dero? We're just speaking random mouth sounds at this point, but you know anything about it?
I've heard of Dero and haven't taken in a deep dive on that, other than it seems to be trying to do that same sort of thing. And I think that shows the fact that there are a few projects here and there trying to do that sort of thing, shows that there are people out there in the world that want that. And at some point, one of these will get some traction. And so take a look at Dero. If it looks interesting, maybe buy some of their tokens too, but you have to decide for yourself. And that's the thing, like people that are, fans of Anarchast and anarchism and self, voluntarism and self-sovereignty, we're free thinkers. We can think outside the box. So we can take a look at these things and decide for ourselves. And that's why I think that's why we're fans of this philosophy, is because we're people who are able to think for ourselves.
Yes. Okay. So kind of back to what we were talking earlier, I wanted to read this quote from the book. It imagines a world in which Satoshi maybe was still in control and had removed the block size limit, and the whole world had gotten used to this status quo of big blocks. And in your book it says, now imagine some upstart devs forked off and reduced the block size to 1 meg. Heavily restricting transactional capacity to create a fluctuating fee market intended to produce long-term fees in excess of $100, driving users to a second-layer system of fee-taking government-regulated financial intermediaries they call hubs. Would this new high-fee coin see any transaction whatsoever? What a perfect way to illustrate the difference. I thought that was
laughed right out of the room.
It was hilarious to even read those words. Why would you switch to a harder to use high fee thing as a store of value? You can store your value.
Go ahead. The next line you had in the quote there was so good as well, though. It says like it needs to be understood that the current BTC price is the result of incumbency, not merit, right? And I think that's so true today. Is that they have the Bitcoin name and the BTC ticker? That's why it has the high price tag, not because of any inherent merit in the product itself. It has a worse user experience than it did years ago.
It has the momentum and it has the network effect of behind the name. And can you talk maybe briefly about sort of the network effect and its importance on the currency? It's the same problem. I worked on a project attempting to start a freedom-oriented social network called Float a while back, and we really experienced the hardship of creating almost from scratch a network effect of people. Very difficult to bootstrap, almost impossible. So, I mean, if you can talk a little bit about that.
Almost impossible. And if anything, I somehow wound up with a nickname like, Bitcoin Jesus along the years. Some people think I'm Bitcoin Judas now that I'm pointing out that Bitcoin doesn't work for payments anymore. But I think a more apt nickname for me would have been Bitcoin Johnny Appleseed, because I went all around the world, planting these Bitcoin seeds, then grew up into this, ecosystem that we have today. But a lot of people haven't realized that, I don't know, the apples on the BTC tree are rotten, and there's other trees that have better fruit at this point. It's, I guess, the best analogy I can come up with at the moment. But building that network effect is so difficult, and the network effect that BTC has today, really, really difficult to supplant. Just like the U.S. dollar, right? The network effect that it has is really, really difficult to supplant. But we'll see what happens there too. But and the world's about to change so much. I'm sure people watching this, they're paying attention to the advancements in AI and other things too. Like, the world's going to be unrecognizable in another 10 years here. So,
are you excited or fearful or both of AI? What's your outlook on that?
Yeah, terror is certainly exciting, right? I wouldn't say I'm terrified, but I'm certainly excited, and I don't know. It's just such a big change that it's hard to predict. So I guess I'm always an optimistic person about everything all the time with everything, but I'm cautiously optimistic, right? There's a lot of dangers and a lot of scary things too, right? It's fantastic if you go and get to meet and talk with somebody with an IQ of 150. Wow, you get to absorb all this interesting thoughts and information. But what's going to be like when we get to talk to some entity with an IQ of 150,000, right? They won't even be interested in you. It'll be, they'll be as interested in you as you are in talking to an ant. There's nothing there for them. And so we don't feel bad when we step on an ant on the, walking down the street. Maybe this eye is going to feel similarly towards us. It's really hard to know. And, but what an exciting time to be alive as well. I was watching Home Alone recently with a niece, and they saw a corded telephone on the wall. And they asked me, "What is that?" Right? And this kid, they didn't even know what a corded telephone was. They'd never seen one ever until, watching over the holidays earlier, the Home Alone movie, they saw their first corded telephone. And I think that's kind of what it's going to be like with the world today. And another, maybe as soon as, 10 or 20 years from now, the way that we're living in the world that we're living in today is just going to be an ancient relic where, whatever people are alive at that point that were born more recently, they're not even going to realize what the world used to be like. And, it's exciting, but it's frightening at the same time. But I can guarantee you these, sentient AIs that are right around the corner, they're not going to be opening bank accounts with Bank of America or Venmo or PayPal. They're going to be using cryptocurrency to pay each other to do things, to pay humans to do things, to receive payments from humans for doing things. They're going to be using cryptocurrency without any doubt, not PayPal or Venmo or Bank of America.
Something like in about 3.5 years from now, there will be adults, 18-year-old adults that have never existed in a world without Bitcoin. And for us that have existed back when there weren't even mobile phones, we need to kind of realize how quickly the technology that we still kind of feel like is new and amazing and this fancy freedom tech, these kids are going to be like, oh, Bitcoin? Yeah, that's that old tech that, is still just,
My dad liked it a long time ago.
Yeah. You boomer, whatever. I guess there's going to be an insulting term for Gen Xers at some point. So we'll see what that ends up being. But okay, so as I was reading,
to be honest, I think most of the kids, if I can point out, I think most of the kids calling people boomers today, I don't think they even realize that it's in reference to the baby boom after World War II. I think they just think it means an old person. I don't think they have any clue as to the origin of that word.
it's probably just transitioned. It's transcended up into a meme now. It doesn't even have a foundational definition anymore. Okay, so when I was reading the book, at the end of it, I kind of realized, okay, the BTC tech has been hijacked. It has been destroyed. And you made an excellent case for that. And then I was like, okay, well, who do we blame? And it came down to two people. Dylan, the guy that you just talked about, funded by an intelligence agency, posted bounties to develop the replace by fee that we talked about that killed instant transaction confirmations. And then we had the crypto civil war, and it was kind of you on one side. There were definitely other people. And then on the other side, it was Bitcoin Core, the Bitcoin Core team. Two people specifically were highlighted in your book. A pseudonymous person, did I say that right? Pseudonymous?
Close enough.
Named Thamus, and another guy named, where is it in my notes?
Probably Cobra Bitcoin, I believe.
Yeah. These people were part of the Bitcoin Core team that just did all sorts of censorship, and you go through and you detail specifically how they censored the discussion around the Bitcoin civil war and Bitcoin XT's attempt to fork off, and other people after that attempting to fork off to maintain big blocks on the blockchain. And there was some mind-blowing stuff in there that I wanted to show quotes from that I'm not sure most people are aware of. First, Thamos, who regulates or moderates or owns, however you want to say that, the Reddit Bitcoin forum, as well as the bitcointalk.org forum. He also owns the Bitcoin wiki, bitcoin.it, just went full-on scorched earth censorship, basically calling anything that doesn't agree with consensus, which has a specific meaning that most people probably don't know, just isn't Bitcoin and cannot be discussed on these platforms, and sort of just get moderated and deleted away without question, without fail. Can you talk to us about what they meant by consensus and how that, how they use it to justify their power? Yeah.
Yeah, basically they meant agreeing with him. If you didn't agree with him, your post would be deleted and your voice would not be allowed to be heard. And if I had to pick like my biggest mistake in the whole Bitcoin civil war, is that I underestimated just how effective censorship can be. And because in the early days when the censorship first started, everybody knew the truth and everybody was mad and they're saying, hey, why are you blocking people from saying this? This is the truth. We should be able to talk about it. And like, the vast majority of the Bitcoin ecosystem was on board with the original version of Bitcoin, which is super fast, super cheap, anonymous payments for the world, peer-to-peer cash. And they hijacked that, but people knew it early on. But after the months and then years went by where everybody that was new to the ecosystem, for the most part, they were only allowed to hear this new point of view. And anybody that had a different point of view was marginalized or silenced to the best of the ability of the people that were, holding the small block point of view. It really made a huge difference. Now that I'm a bit older and a bit wiser, I realize that the reason governments engage in so much propaganda and so much censorship is because it works, and it works incredibly terrifyingly well. And if you don't know that for yourself, just look at how many people around the world think that Julian Assange is a bad guy, or how many people think that Edward Snowden is a traitor. Or a really extreme example of it, I read this true story, Escape from Camp 19 or 21, or I forget the number, but it's about a guy that was born in North Korea and went through all the North Korean brainwashing, and his family didn't have enough to eat, and they were literally slowly starving to death. And his mother and sister one evening were talking about running away to China so that they could get enough food to eat so they wouldn't starve to death. And this young man had been brainwashed so much that the next day when he went to the, not the public school, the indoctrination camp, let's call them what they are, whether it's in the US or North Korea, but he went to the indoctrination camp and told his teacher, his indoctrination person, right, that my mother and my sister are talking about escaping to China because they don't have enough to eat. And then the next day, they hung his mother in front of the entire town. They murdered his mother. And the guy today is an adult. He escaped into China later as an adult and then made it to South Korea. But he was talking about how sad he was, that he was so brainwashed that at the time he felt glad when he saw his own mother get murdered. Because he thought, how could she disobey How could she disobey? Our dear leader was undone. But what a powerful testament to how effective brainwashing is, that it can brainwash people into wanting to have their own mother murdered for wanting to have enough food to eat so she doesn't starve to death. And so the propaganda that goes on in Bitcoin can be just as effective. And these governments do horrible, horrible things to people all over the world. Don't think that the propaganda in Bitcoin wasn't effective. If it can brainwash this guy into wanting his own mother to be murdered, it can brainwash people into thinking that small blocks were good for Bitcoin. And that's why governments all around the world engage in censorship and propaganda, is because it works. And it worked on Bitcoin, and it worked to undermine Bitcoin's ability to liberate people all over the world into having more control over their own lives. And that's why it's important for shows like this to continue to spread the truth and speak out against the propaganda and speak out against the censorship and keep spreading the truth. Because if we won't do it, nobody else will. And as Larkin Rose has pointed out time and time again, there's maybe lots of people thinking like this, but if they don't hear anybody else saying it, they'll think I'm all alone in the world. But when they hear people like us out there saying it, they'll think, oh, there's somebody else saying the same things I think and I feel. I'm not alone. I guess I should speak up too. And there'll be more and more of us that are willing to speak out. And, maybe we're actually the silent majority in the world. But if we stop being silent, maybe we'll become the vocal majority in the world as well. And that's why it's so important to speak truth to power time and time again, over and over again.
If you control someone's moral framework, you control the person, because most people want to be good. And if what they think is good is reporting their mother for wanting to escape, then they will feel like the hero for facilitating great atrocities. That's the story of the history of the human species. Control someone's moral framework, control the species. And I rant often on this channel. People are probably tired of hearing me talk about it, that parenting is the most powerful form of activism, because you are introducing new minds into the world, and you can protect them from these negative outside influences and show them the truth of the power structures in the world that seek to control everybody around them. And call things for what they are, by their true names. The cops writing speeding tickets are sort of like armed robbers on the roads trying to catch you out for doing stupid things. Anyway, so yes.
Yeah. Or shout out to Vince Saprinowitz, who pointed out that public schools aren't public schools. He called them mandatory youth propaganda camps. And I remember that really seemed shocking when I read it for the first time. But if you stop and think about what these are, they really are. They're mandatory youth propaganda camps funded by theft.
A side note for the audience, I put out a series of 9 videos that I called Peaceful Parenting University, and they've kind of disappeared from the internet over time. I think I'm going to sort of remaster those and put them back out. I really want people to learn how to parent the next generation successfully, so be on the lookout for that. Peaceful Parenting University. Okay, so let's just dive in a little bit more deeply into the censorship. This was something they posted on Reddit's Bitcoin site. This is a direct quote from Thamus. If 90% of Bitcoin users find these policies to be intolerable, then I want 90% of them to leave. These people will be happier for it. Just unabashedly deciding, and this is the consensus you're talking about, it's the 5 developers, it's the Bitcoin Core 5 people in charge of the code base that we're talking about here, that when they talk about consensus, they mean a near unanimous agreement between those 5 humans. And those 5 humans, as long as they decide what Bitcoin is and is not. And if they decide that it's not Bitcoin, then it is verboten on all of their communications and forums and community platforms. And that goes to this quote, where it went so far as that Coinbase, a little company you guys might have heard of called Coinbase, said that they were going to go with Bitcoin XT and support the Bitcoin XT fork, which I'm going to oversimplify was like a predecessor to like a BCH, a big block. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was basically advocating for Bitcoin to continue being what it was supposed to be. And Bitcoin XT is kind of what wound up becoming what's called Bitcoin Cash today.
Yes.
And what they did is they said, we're going to ban them from bitcoin.org. We're not even going to mention Coinbase, right? And they did the same thing to bitcoin.com, and they threatened to do it to BitPay, and they basically threatened to do it to, there was 98% of all the big businesses in Bitcoin at that point were in favor of Bitcoin being able to scale on the the scaling path that eventually wound up becoming what's called Bitcoin Cash today. And this guy literally said, "Oh, we're going to remove all of them from any mention of their businesses on Bitcoin.org and BitcoinTalk.org and the Bitcoin subreddit and all these things." It was just absolutely crazy at the time, and still is crazy.
So Coinbase supported Bitcoin XT, and they must literally said the following words about Coinbase. If Coinbase promotes XT to customers on Coinbase.com and or switches all of its full nodes to BIP 101, which is the XT supporting software, then Coinbase is no longer using the Bitcoin currency because we said so, and it doesn't belong on r/Bitcoin. This also applies to BitcoinTalk.org, where Coinbase would be restricted to the altcoin section. Same thing for Bitcoin.it and Bitcoin.org, similar policies. In fact, Coinbase was already almost removed from Bitcoin.org due to your past statements on this matter. Literally telling Coinbase what Bitcoin is. It just blew my mind to read that. I had never seen that before. Your book exposed me to that.
I hope it exposes lots of people to that, because I think a lot of people don't know this story, and that's why we're already seeing so many maximalists saying horrible things about this book when they haven't even read it yet. It's not even on sale. I gave you an advance copy so we could do this interview. It goes on sale April 5th, but you can pre-order it today at hijackingbitcoin.com, and you can see why all these people are already attacking it, because it's pointing out the crazy lies and deceit and censorship that went on to literally hijack Bitcoin, and they're going to be really upset to have this exposed like it's being exposed in this great book that I'm so glad has finally been written.
I should have asked you before showing quotes from your book. I thought it was going to be for sale. Tell me if I need to stop, because I apologize.
Please continue it. It's just fine. And if you want to get this message out, go and buy a copy for yourself. Buy a copy for friends and family. Like, I think it's even if you were just on the periphery of Bitcoin, I think you'll find it really, really interesting to see just how a product that was promised to be so free from outside control was definitely controlled and corrupted and hijacked right there from the inside.
And sure enough, in December 2015, Coinbase went ahead and switched to XT, and Bitcoin.org removed them. The removal was done by another pseudonym named Cobra, one of the site's owners. I have a question. I've become, as a libertarian anarcho-capitalist podcaster for, I don't know, coming up on 15 years, and have been mired in the political debates of our ideology, which I'm sure you have seen for that long. I have become very pessimistic on pseudonyms and people that won't put their real identity behind their words. The quality of the discourse that you get out of anonymous people is low. What are your thoughts on that in regards to like crypto projects?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I can find a lot more trust and people seem to do better things in the world when they're standing behind what they're doing and using their first and last name. And I've only had basically two nicknames I've used on the internet. One is Roger Veer or Roger K. Veer if that wasn't available. And then the other was Memory Dealers, which was my first, company that I started because I wanted to promote my company everywhere else. And like, never have I been using, Steve Jones, 123 or some way to try and hide who I am, because I want to stand behind the things that I'm saying. When I say that, it's not public schools, they're mandatory youth propaganda camps. Roger Veer said that, but I heard it from Vince Abramowitz as well, which I believe was using his real name when he wrote a fantastic book called Send in the Waco Killers, which is, a couple decades old now, but really was a fantastic book that influenced me as a young man as well to really realize, the government's doing lots of really bad things and maybe they're not my friends and maybe I shouldn't trust them. But yeah, I tend to agree. I really appreciate people that stand behind what they say and use their real name to support it.
I mean, I understand why some people try and be pseudonymous, but most of them behave like just garbage
jerks.
Yeah, jerks. Or they just do stuff. I mean, like in the case of Bitcoin, we have Cobra and we have Thamos. Thamos, I guess, was outed by a court case where his identity was exposed. But I believe Cobra, correct me if I'm wrong, is still pseudonymous. And these people in your book, you exposed them, or you, I guess you didn't expose them because the information was already out there. Yeah, their interactions where they were literally talking about rewriting the Bitcoin white paper because it was outdated and the implementation has significantly changed from 2009 because they changed it. They moved away from the white paper. Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying if that's not proof of the hijacking of Bitcoin, what is? They literally are saying they want to change the white paper that defined what Bitcoin was and release it to the world because it no longer matches the thing that everybody's calling Bitcoin today. So there's some more proof.
Exactly. They said, quote, interesting suggestion. The paper is definitely outdated. And I often see people saying, just read the white paper. This is what I do. This is what I did when people said that Bitcoin should have small blocks. I'm like, wait. The white paper literally says, digital cash over and over. And your book does an excellent job of citing instance after instance where Nakamoto talks about his intention for the technology. To me, it's not unclear at all.
My opinion. This is based in fact, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're very clearly wanting to update the white paper because they've decided the purpose no longer matches with the white paper. So instead of forking and going and working on the purpose that they want it to be, that's different from Nakamoto, they're just going to subvert the technology.
And they succeeded, unfortunately.
And they did. The white paper, Cobra chimed in. Let's see. This was interesting. Let me find this screenshot real quick. I feel like I don't want to give away all the good parts of your book, but I'm trying to spice it for people so they'll go and pick it up. Cobra was having a conversation back and forth on the Bitcoin.org website. Somebody was arguing back and forth about do miners control Bitcoins or do the developers control Bitcoin? And the developers are very bothered by this idea that the miners control Bitcoin and not them. And they've been thinking that Bitcoin.org should somehow act against this conception more than it is already. They should require that wallets and services sign a very simple pledge that acknowledges that Bitcoin is not ruled by miners in order to be linked from Bitcoin.org. And Cobra chimed in saying the white paper is to blame for all these dangerous beliefs. We seriously need to rewrite it or produce a completely new white paper and call that the Bitcoin white paper. You're working on a different technology. Like you have admitted what you're doing right there, as you say. It's a great book.
There's your point. And but today most of the world has been fooled. But again, the goal with this book is to get the truth out there so people can realize what actually happened.
I realize what's happening is I invited you on your show to read your book to you, and that wasn't my intention, but the book was really good.
And you can buy it with cryptocurrency as well. We made sure that you could literally go and buy it with cryptocurrency because a lot of these other, BTC type things, like they don't even take Bitcoin at lots of these Bitcoin conferences nowadays because it works so poorly for payments. So,
okay, so you brought up one more thing that I want to talk about. I say one, probably not one, but you talked about kind of who sided with Bitcoin XT versus the small blockers. And it really came down to Chinese miners siding with small blockers or the incumbents, the Bitcoin core team, the ones that they perceive to be the leaders of the authority or of the leaders of the community. And I thought this was a very interesting cultural point that you made in the book about the culture in China having influence over these technologies. Can you kind of talk about how they interact with hierarchies and power structures that may have led them to make a decision that's impacted all of us?
Yeah, they seem to not really want any confrontation. And when they finally realized that the issues with Bitcoin became so bad, when they finally were willing to take action, it was kind of too little too late at that point. And I don't want to blame it. The Chinese had all the mining power, the majority of the mining power, but the miners in the West, for the most part, weren't that much better either. And a lot of them were just like, either didn't understand what was going on or didn't want to rock the boat or were scared or the way you would get attacked too if you did speak out against the Bitcoin core group, like they would DDoS your nodes, they would do cyber attacks effectively, like Bitcoin.com. I'm still deleting spam mail that they signed up every Bitcoin.com email address they could find to every single email address they could email spam list they could find to this very day. Years later, I'm still dealing with the aftermath of that spam attack, and they were DDoSing all our nodes. Like, they really played dirty with every dirty trick in the book that they could find. And I think a lot of people just didn't want to deal with that. And so it was easier for them just to put their head down and not rock the boat at all, specifically so in China. But the rest of the world wasn't all that different, to be honest.
So I came away with the impression that, and I guess you're correcting me here, that I maybe kind of read into it too much or misread it, that sort of the communist Chinese cultural predilection towards community being good and disobedience to authority being bad was a powerful force multiplying lever that led their faction of the mining to sort of side against XT. Did I just get that wrong? Did I read too much into that from the book?
That probably was, but we didn't really get to see that in the West so much because there wasn't as much mining power in the West. But we got to see it firsthand in China that was the case. So
okay, all right, okay. This is fascinating. This whole thing is fascinating. I had no idea who Craig Wright was because, like I said, I checked out sort of following the Civil War. And my first interaction with him was him blocking me on Twitter. I didn't even know who he was. I just saw it was a high follow count guy that got offended because I screenshotted one of his posts and I put a red line through everything that was statist about it. And I'm like, no, here's the correct freedom position of what you just said. Had no idea who he was. He did not like that. Blocked me immediately. And I'm like, okay, that was weird. And then later I find out that he was involved in forking away from BCH. Can you tell us that story briefly and kind of tell us about Craig Wright and what he's been through? Did you wait to publish this book until the case was finished for reasons, or no?
No, it just kind of happened that way, to be honest.
Okay.
The timing was really good going on with everything that Craig Wright just lost his court case, and it seems like finally people are waking up and realizing that like he's not Satoshi and that he was lying to everybody about it. But previously I called him a liar and a fraud in regards to that. And then he sued me. He's been suing everybody for the last couple of years there. And it's been really annoying to deal with all of that. But finally, just a few days ago, he lost some other big court case, and people that had been brainwashed into thinking that he was Satoshi or this and that are finally waking up and realizing that he wasn't. But it's really, really hard for people to admit that they were wrong and change their position. And early on, Craig had me fooled into thinking that he was Satoshi as well. And it took me a while before I figured out that, hey, I was fooled, right? Like, it's really, really hard for people to admit that they were fooled. And I think finally now just about everybody has realized that the guy's just a sophisticated con man or liar, and he's been fooling everybody. But it was dangerous to say that before because he would sue you, and he would sue you in jurisdictions where like it's really, really expensive to defend as well. He's not suing you in small claims court where you can defend yourself. And like in America, for the most part, if whatever you say, if it's true, that's the end of it, right? But apparently, like in other countries, even if what you're saying is true, they can still sue you for libel and defamation. And which was a real big shock to me as well. But he sued me, I don't know, maybe 5 separate times in maybe 3 different countries or something like that. And eventually I won all of them. But like I had to lay out hundreds of thousands of dollars to lawyers' fees that eventually when he lost, he had to pay me back. But like most people don't have that much money sitting around that they can, spend for years and years and years in advance to defend themselves. So most people were scared to speak out against this guy. But, I'm glad that phase of Bitcoin's life seems to be just about over. I think almost everybody's realized that it's over. And then poor Calvin Ayre, the Canadian, gambling tycoon, he literally spent, probably hundreds of millions of dollars of his own money advertising to the world the fact that he had been conned by Craig Wright. He didn't phrase it that way, but he was out there supporting him right, left, and center. That just means he's, literally spending his own money to advertise to the world that he's been fooled by a con man. So Calvin, I'm sorry you got fooled by Craig. I'm sorry you spent so much money advertising to the world that you got fooled by Craig. But better late than never. I think it was Charlie Munger, right? Recently passed away, world famous investor. He said, like, when you find a mistake, you have to fix it right away. The moment you notice a mistake, go out there and fix it. Ignoring that you've made a mistake just makes the mistake bigger and longer and worse and causes more problems in your life. So as soon as you find a mistake, go out there and fix it. And so Calvin, your mistake was believing Craig. Don't believe him. And now that you know that mistake, go out there and fix it. And, and everything in life, when you find a mistake, fix it as fast as you can so you're not living your life by a lie.
I guess I should be glad that the only thing that happened to me was getting blocked on Twitter. I didn't know he was so litigious. And I thought he only had sued you after reading your book. I didn't know he sued you 5 times and a bunch of other people.
He sued pretty much everybody. He sued Vitalik Buterin, like he sued, anybody and everybody he's been suing out there. So
that's nuts. Okay. Then you had briefly, I want to go into Bitcoin ABC. There was another attempted fork. The first time I ever talked to you was I was trying to put together debates for Anarchapulco, and I reached out to see if you wanted to debate another person around this issue of ABC, and you turned down that debate. In retrospect, it was probably a good idea for you to have done so. So respect for doing that. I hope you took my invitation in the light that I was giving it in. But can you just tell us what ended up happening with ABC, and what was your opinion on the current state of it?
Yeah, so actually, I want to correct one more thing. You'll see all over the internet is that I'm the creator of Bitcoin Cash. The truth is that I had absolutely nothing to do with the creation of Bitcoin Cash. There was another guy named Amaury Sachet, a French guy, was the main developer that created Bitcoin Cash, and he was paid to do so by another guy named Jihan Wu, who was a big Chinese miner and founder of Bitmain. And then Bitcoin Cash, created by Amaury Sachet, there worked better than Bitcoin, right? Or it should have actually wound up becoming Bitcoin, and nearly did there at one point. But I'm sorry, the specific question in regards to Bitcoin ABC was what again?
So he was trying to find a way to fund development, and he built in an 8% payment.
Yeah. So, basically, I guess Jihan stopped paying him salary. I gave him hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more than $1 million total to Bitcoin ABC to support it. But
wow.
I don't know, it wasn't enough apparently. And so what he decided to do was to fork off Bitcoin ABC into another coin that literally, and I think initially it was 8%. And then when the price went down, I think even increased to 12% of the block reward literally goes directly to his own wallet that he controls the key. So I think the nickname people gave it on the internet was the Amaury tax, where he literally diverted part of the block reward right to his own pocket. And okay, you can do, it's open source project. You can do whatever you want, but it doesn't mean the rest of us are going to follow you or appreciate that or like that. And at this point, it's kind of not a serious competitor in the cryptocurrency space. I don't know what it's ranked. It's on CoinMarketCap. They then rebranded to something called eCash. And I think the total amount of money they're getting probably isn't all that much compared to what they were getting voluntarily from donations previously and business support. But he seems to have gotten some tech stuff done with that. But it's completely off my radar at this point. And I wish him good luck in the future. And I don't have any ill will there towards him. And but it's not a product that's interesting to me because, as we talked about earlier, building that community is probably the hardest part of cryptocurrencies at this point. If you don't have a strong community, you're not going to get traction anywhere. And that community he has, as far as I can tell, maybe a couple dozen people or something. It's not a big enough community to be very interesting.
Okay, so now let's end on some hopeful notes. What are you up to now? What are you involved in? Where should people go to find out things you're working on?
Yeah, well, first and foremost in this interview, head on over to hijackingbitcoin.com. Buy a copy of this book. You will be thoroughly entertained. You'll learn a lot of new things. And I think this story really needs to be told to the world because it's really a tragic tale. We had this amazing, get free quick scheme that would literally liberate people all over the world. And it's been hijacked into something that may wind up financially enslaving people all over the world, in which every single transaction is tracked and monitored and controlled right down to the last Satoshi there. And that would be a really, really big disappointment. But luckily, there's a lot of other competing cryptocurrencies out there, whether it's Monero or Zano or whatever else. But take a look into those things. And what have I been working on? I don't know. It's I've spent well over a decade in the field of cryptocurrency. I think I want to just enjoy my life a little bit at this point, and my friends and family and that sort of thing. And so it's nice to be able to do that as well. So, but I'm not disappearing completely, but I'm not 100 plus hours a week into cryptocurrency like I was for maybe the first decade.
Nice. That's a good place to be in, it sounds like. Okay, I have a few viewer questions that we collected from various venues. If you have a few more minutes, maybe I'll run a couple of the good ones by you. Here's one from somebody that might be a critic of yours, but it was asked respectfully, so I'll forward it on to you. BTC runs on consensus. Why do your followers parrot, quote, what Satoshi wanted when what Satoshi coded was consensus?
That's not even true. Also, like Satoshi literally, he wrote in words and he wrote in software code how to increase the block size. So I invite that person to buy a copy of the book and they'll see all the exact details right there, plain as day, indisputable, And that's why the other side, the small block side, had to engage in censorship, because if the truth got out there, people would be able to see the truth. And that's why the censorship's still going on to this very day.
Here's a great question. This is one of those negative questions. What do you think will be the biggest points of contention and dispute by BTC maxis in your book?
Great question. Everything's cited so well. I think they're going to have a really hard time, and they're just going to have to resort to personal attacks and say, "Oh, Roger's an ex-convict who went to federal prison for selling. He's a terrorist. I sold store-bought firecrackers on eBay, and then ran for political office as a libertarian and got the U.S. government mad at me for the political things I said. So I wound up being the only person in the entire world to be prosecuted for selling those firecrackers without a permit. And even while I was in prison, the company I had been buying them from was still selling them without a permit. So I think they'll resort to attacking me for that sort of thing. And then they'll just resort to other name calling and say, "Oh, he's a known scammer or known liar," and without any citations or any sources. They just plain lie about you. They resort to personal attacks. And so I think that'll be their biggest argument against the book, because you can't attack the book on the facts. It's all cited. Everything's right in there. Like it's indisputable if you pick up the book and take a look at it. So I think they'll just resort to ad hominem attacks.
As the internet does. And they'll mostly be from pseudonymous people. Pseudonymous? I don't know, whatever. I'll figure that word out.
Is how it's pronounced.
What is it?
I think it's pseudonymous, but I'm not sure.
All right. This is
outside of the U.S. for a long time. My English is fading a bit. So
really? That happens?
Is fantastic. I'll give you this interview in Japanese if you'd like. So.
Wow. So English can fade? I didn't know that. I thought it would be with you forever.
Yeah. I find myself sometimes thinking in Japanese rather than English at this point. So, and sometimes I'll type something out and I'll read what I just wrote. Someone who grew up in the U.S. and I'll read it and I'll think, "Oh my God, a native English speaker did not just write that." So, but for the most part, my English is still okay. But it's interesting how other languages, if you really immerse yourself in them, can start to creep in and take over.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. All right, last question. And this I'm curious about as well. Does he still think that BCH is in the Goldilocks zone between Monero and BTC? My version of that question would be, we have Monero. Where does BCH fit into the equation?
Yeah, I think there's room for both. I think a lot of people have been disappointed that I didn't Monero more heavily. But I bought a pile of Monero when it was right around $1 each, and I've been a giant Monero fan the whole time. And the reason I bought it is because I was looking at what was happening with Bitcoin. They were hijacking it, making it less useful. And so I bought a bunch of Monero. I bought a bunch of Dash. I bought a bunch of Bitcoin Cash later. I bought a bunch of Ethereum. I've had a diverse portfolio from day one in the world of cryptocurrency. But Monero is awesome, first of all, but Monero is frustrating also. And the reason it's frustrating is because we're filming this. I'm in South Korea at the moment. Monero is not allowed to be listed on a single exchange in South Korea. In another 4 days, I'm heading over to Japan. Monero is not allowed to be listed on a single exchange in Japan. There are lots of countries in the world where Monero is not even allowed to be listed. And as one of the earliest Bitcoiners said, Mike Hearn, he said, even outlaws can't use an outlaw currency. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for Monero, is that it's not allowed to be listed on, I don't think Coinbase has Monero. A lot of these exchanges, Binance recently was forced to delist Monero. If Monero is not on all these illegal places, even outlaws won't be able to use it. And so I think that's a real big hurdle for Monero. And I love Monero. Monero is awesome, but that's one of the real big benefits that Bitcoin Cash has for it, is that Bitcoin Cash has the same Genesis block as Bitcoin. You can't ban Bitcoin without saying that you should ban Bitcoin Cash as well. Or you can't ban Bitcoin Cash without saying you should ban Bitcoin as well, because they have that same origin and same blockchain for the first, 10 years or so there. That's a really, really big selling point for Bitcoin Cash. And Bitcoin Cash is likely to wind up with all the same institutional adoption of Bitcoin. We're likely to see an ETF any day now for Bitcoin Cash. People maybe at some point will start to realize, oh, wait a minute, Bitcoin Cash has the exact same scarcity as Bitcoin, but it has better privacy tools and it works for payments. Like, what's not to like about Bitcoin Cash there? And Monero doesn't have that. And then one other thing that's just annoying is that the Monero community, I feel like, not everybody, and there's some fantastic people in the Monero community, but there's also some really toxic people that are just plain willing to, lie, cheat, and steal to cause trouble in other chains. And it's been disappointing to see some of those people be really public spokespeople. And like, I've had enough drama in my life with my involvement with Bitcoin, but like one example of it is one of the most prominent people in Monero. I got a few years back, I had I woke up early and haven't had any breakfast yet, so my brain is slipping me. The name of Tim Draper. Was a little bit slower to come to my words there, but I got him to buy $5 million of Bitcoin Cash a few years back. And then he went out there and put out on Twitter, like, thank you, Roger Ver, for explaining the difference between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin for me. I'm now, a proud owner of Bitcoin Cash or something like that. And he tagged on Twitter at Roger Ver. But my Twitter account is at Roger K. Ver. So he tagged some other poor Roger Ver out there, and all the maxis went crazy. And then this real prominent guy in the field of Monero there went and put on Twitter that, I contacted Tim's office. He's confirmed that his Twitter account was hacked and that he would never buy Bcash. Just plain lied to the entire world about it. And then all the crypto media sites republished that. Tim Draper's account was hacked and used to promote Bcash. He would never buy Bitcoin Cash. And like, it was a full, and then all the maxis went and, piled on Tim Draper and browbeat him, and to the point where he just plain deleted his tweet. And then when he deleted the tweet, they figured, it must have been true. His account was hacked, and like, really, really sad to see the way that, one of these, most prominent people in the Monero area would just plain lie. I don't know if he thought it was funny. I don't know if he thought, Bitcoin Cash was a competitor to Monero, because like Cash Fusion on Bitcoin Cash gives you really strong privacy on Bitcoin Cash. Just very recently, somebody wasn't aware of Cash Fusion on Bitcoin Cash and the privacy it can give. He said, no, the Chainalysis guys can track everything on Bitcoin Cash. He says, you want to try? Give me your address. I'll send you some Bitcoin Cash. Send it to your buddies at Chainalysis and have them give it a look. And he gave me a copy of the report that came back from Chainalysis on the Bitcoin. Like, I withdrew from a prominent exchange, sent it to my Cash Fusion wallet, only went through one cycle of Cash Fusion, and then sent it to this guy. Chainalysis got everything wrong. They got absolutely nothing right in the report. And it was really nice to see that they had absolutely nothing right in the Chainalysis report. So maybe this Monero fan felt that Bitcoin Cash was a threat on the privacy front. But what I would like to see crypto coins doing in their communities is let's lift everybody up, right? As soon as we get out of the traditional government banking, everybody's better off. And it doesn't matter if they're using Monero or Bitcoin Cash or Zcash or Zano or even Bitcoin, if you could somehow self-sovereignty it and have privacy on it as well. Like, if you're using some sort of cryptocurrency where you can have custody yourself and have some privacy, you're far better off. So I'd love to see the Bitcoin Cash and the Monero people and everybody else supporting each other and lifting everybody up, rather than trolling on Twitter with just plain lies. And he just plain lied about Tim Draper and his account there. And I don't know what his motivation was, but it really left a bad taste in my mouth for one of the most prominent people in the Monero community there.
Were they pseudonymous?
People know his real name, but he's using the screen name. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, that's an uplifting place to end our chat on. So thank you for that. I'll give you the last word for sure, just to remind people of where they can find your stuff, and I'll definitely have the links in the description.
Yeah, hijackingbitcoin.com. Head on over there, buy a copy of the book. Whatever the next holiday is, give some out for friends as well. And then the other thing I want to share, not just within the crypto community, let's lift every other project up that's not an intentional scam or something like that. Any product that's empowering individuals to have more control over their own lives. But let's do the same with our philosophy of voluntarism and peaceful interactions with other human beings. Let's share that with people around the world as well, because this is the world we're all living in. Let's deal with let's spread this philosophy, because it's the only true philosophy of how people should deal with other people, right? There's only two ways: with violence and force and fraud, or with peaceful interactions. And so let's build this peaceful world. And a lot of people haven't even heard of this philosophy before. So let's spread this to more and more people around the world and make the world a better place by spreading that along with cryptocurrency.
Beautiful. Roger, thanks for the chat. Thanks for letting me read your own book to you for an hour and 20 minutes. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to having you on the show, 100 more times. So
I look forward to the next time as well. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Let us know what you think in the comments. Peace, love, and anarchy.